That's right.
What do you think of Randy Thornhill's work on parasite prevalence and conservatism, which seems to be logically associated, at least to some degree, with your work on disgust?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. I mean, I know the hypothesis. I think it makes a lot of sense. So basically the idea that cultures that evolved with high parasite loads, other people are much more dangerous. You're much more, careful about outsiders coming in. They bring disease, and so conservatives tend to be more, and actually a nice metaphor in the Brexit context: are we drawbridge up people or are we drawbridge down? And the Brexiters were more drawbridge up. Here's our island, and the more universalist, Remainers were more drawbridge down. And over again, you see. The progressive mindset is much more John Lennon, imagine no borders, just everybody living in peace. And the conservative mindset
might be the fundamental political difference. I thought this because, the two traits that predict political belief seem to be openness, predicting liberalism and the kind of things that you're talking about, and orderliness. And so if you think, why do those co-vary to predict political belief? And it seems to me to be something very much like what you just described with relationship to borders is, are you on the side of free flow because you see the advantages, or are you afraid of that perhaps because of pathogen contagion?
Yeah, that's right. And so here's a very useful word. Once you hear it, it just explains, it improves things here. There's been a debate for a while about whether conservatives are authoritarian, whether authoritarianism is exclusively the province of the right. A long search for left-wing authoritarianism. I think there is such a thing. You think so too. Actually, right. You've produced some research on that. But I heard an interview with John Hibbing, who's a political scientist who's done a lot of research on the sort of the physiology or brain basis or, the psychology of politics. And he says the word we use shouldn't be authoritarian. It's not primarily authoritarian. It's primarily securitarian. People who are really focused on security, they want us to be safe. They see threats over the borders. If that's the way your mind is more, then you will end up more attracted to parties right of center. Whereas if you're less concerned about security, then you go more left of center. And boy, is this playing out in New York City right now because, we had a horrible crime wave that went on for decades in this city. It ended in the 90s, and it seems to be picking back up as of 2 or 3 months ago. I mean, it increased during the pandemic, but the last couple of months, my neighborhood's gotten really much more dangerous, more crimes.
I'm sorry to hear that because New York was so good for so long.
Yeah, my wife and kids could walk around at 11 o'clock at midnight. They could walk around. Millennials were taking the subway out to Brooklyn at 4 a.m. And I hope that'll come back. But in the last couple of months, it looks like it's back to the 70s. Anyway, the reason I bring it up is just to say that we're having a mayoral election. The primary is going on right now, and election day is tomorrow. And back when it seemed like everything was great, we're going to come out of this. One set of candidates was attractive, but now it's oh really? You said defund the police? No way! No, we need the police. We actually really, really need the police. So there's as soon as there's a real threat, many people, not just conservatives, but many people suddenly say, wait a sec, security is really important.
And do you think that this is a particularly germane question to you? We tried to look for heightened levels of anxiety in conservatives in my lab for a long time. We never found them, not really.
Right,
that's right. But it's the disgust issue that's so germane to me. It's like when you say security, do you mean control of what's contemptible and disgusting, or do you mean what's threatening? Those are not the same thing.
Yeah, I think following Hibbing, I think it's what's threatening. No, because you're right. The neuroticism, if anything, is more common on the left. Conservatives are happier by some measures, not by all. There are a variety of psychological traits that do seem to indicate greater psychological adjustment among conservatives, and including happiness. And so I would not, it'd be weird to say that conservatives are more anxious, but yet they do seem to be more threat sensitive. Would you agree with that?
I don't know. I wrote a whole book sort of theorizing that the purpose of belief was to bring anxiety under control and uncertainty, and there's something to that. But disgust has occupied more and more in my imagination with regards to political belief, partly because of your work, partly because of Randy Thornhill's, partly because there is an association between orderliness and conservatism and orderliness and disgust sensitivity. And it's not associated with neuroticism, which is so strange, right? Because the negative emotions clump together.
You're right.
So you'd expect, really, it's a killer piece of evidence. If conservatives are more threat sensitive, they should show higher levels of neuroticism on some measures, and they just don't. And so you can see in lab situations, there are some stimuli they seem to overreact to, but it isn't obvious that it's associated with the canonical negative emotions. But disgust is a whole...